Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening and welcome to the program. This is Michael Anthony Ingram. Tonight, my very special guest is poet Erin Carlyle. Erin is the author of the new book, Magnolia Canopy Otherworld. Erin, are you with me?
I am. Hi.
Hello. How are you tonight?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
Great. I'm quite well. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining me.
You.
My very first question to you, what is poetry?
Wow. I've been thinking about this, and I've thought about this probably, since I was a little girl, because I've discovered poetry in some form in different ways, in elementary school, and felt connected to it. I know it when I read it. I know how it makes me feel connected. It makes me feel understood. But I don't, I think there are probably smarter people than me who have theorized about it, maybe written about it, but to me, it's communication. It's communication of that deep inner self. And that can be a connection to, other people through, politics, things like that, but it's that deep inner connection. That's what I think of when I think of poetry. And that's sort of how I, when I found it when I was a little girl, it's like, I don't know what this means, but I feel like this person's trying to tell me something. Like this person reaching out to me and trying to, maybe not relate is not the right word, but engage me in some way. So for me, I think it, maybe to be broad, it's communication.
All right. So
yeah.
a slightly different question is, why is it important? Why is poetry important to you? I think,
right, to me, and then I think poetry should be important to other people, but for me, it's how I've learned to engage with the world. It's how I have spoken to other people and how I have taken in other people's messages. So I think that poetry is important because it's a way to engage either politically, emotionally, sexually, all of the things that you can possibly think of to connect with somebody. Poetry can do that, just in its condensed, language. So I don't know if I'm answering that,
yes.
but for
yes,
that,
it's perfect.
Again,
perfect,
it goes back
answer.
to that communication, just like really connecting with other people.
Very nice, very nice. As you think about your body of work, what are some of the predominant themes?
So for my book, Magnolia Canopy Otherworld, and then I have a little chapbook too called You Spit Hills in My Body. I was sort of thinking, and I actually have like a box of my old teenage poetry too, which is bad, but very cute to read. I think I was sort of grappling with the same things then. So it's like I'm 38, almost 39 now. And so my 16-year-old self was trying to figure the same things out. But it's like, I grew up really poor in the South, partially in Alabama and partially in Kentucky. And I'm sort of thinking about how poverty informs girlhood, how it informs your body, how, things like that can tear a family apart too. My parents, unfortunately, my dad had a heart attack when he was 36 years old and subsequently became addicted to opioids. That's sort of like the early 90s, mid 90s when they were kind of giving those out a little more easily than they are now. There's lots of documentaries about that, so people want to be informed about it. And so, it's sort of it's a lot about, in girlhood, place, poverty, but also drug use and how that can tear apart a family and how that informs adolescence. It changes you and your parents, the people who are supposed to take care of you, go through a tragedy in and of themselves, and no blame on their part or anything like that. It just is what it is,
Yes.
So those are things I've been working with, maybe since I was 16 years old, and it sort of came to fruition with this book, Magnolia Canopy Otherworld. So I guess it's like 20, 30 years in the making.
All right. Very nice. Very nice. And the topics that you cover are important to cover, especially poverty, how poverty affects girlhood. That sounds fascinating to me, how that affects girlhood. Very, very nice. Please share a poem for us, please.
Sure. Okay, so this is the first poem in the collection. It's called Sunday Drive. It's kind of inspired. It is inspired by driving to my grandma's house in the winter. And if you drive out so I was born in Columbus, Georgia, and I lived in a little town called Phoenix City, Alabama. And my grandma lived in this very, very tiny town called Pittsview. So if you drive from Phoenix City out to Pittsview, it's just like, there's still nothing there. When my dad passed away, my brother and I drove out there to kind of see what it looks like, and it still looks the same. But there's just pine trees and the side of the road. And, maybe I was slightly morbid as a kid, and maybe now even too. So I would think, what's in the woods, or like, think about like, I don't know, maybe too much true crime stuff too. So that's what this is about. Sunday Drive. We drive in cold weather, 3 in the front seat. Mama lays a hand on my chest, a sudden stop. We pass over a frozen bridge, and if I rise in my seat, I can see down to the water, to the ice where I know girls slip under and get fished out, trash stuck on skirts. I know girls wait there, but Daddy drives fast, and I see ditches along the side of the road and dogs dead in winter, dressed in leaves. Their paws look like hands. They're women in the blur of his driving, dancing like wet, tangled hair. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful, Erin.
Nice way to start a collection. Like, oh, man, this is going to be something.
Well, why did you put that particular poem first?
So at first, the first 2 poems, I'm thinking this poem right here, Sunday Drive, sort of introduces you to this family unit. And it introduces you to the world of what I'm thinking of as the Magnolia Canopy Otherworld, sort of this like wilderness, this forest or the woods that isn't, it's not ideal, and especially isn't ideal for women and girls. And I sort of wanted it to be this like introduction to both that family unit, the danger, and the other themes, the ghostly otherworldness of my imagined self,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, do you sit and think through every word of every stanza, or do you write freely and allow the words to flow?
That's a good question. I think at first, when I have an idea or something is bubbling up, it'll be like a feeling or something. Like I know, I've watched a movie or I read something or whatever, and I want to do something about that, or I want it to be me, but me. And I'll sit down and just let it come out. So it'll be free.
Okay.
But then, I'm not like super prolific. Like I can't just sit down all the time and do it. Something like that it'll be free at first, and then it'll take months to be the thing that it's supposed to be. So then I am micromanaged, I'm like, oh, this word needs to go and it needs to be a different word, and I'm like oh, let's change it to couplets or whatever, that kind of thing. That comes later, but at first it's definitely free. Like what is coming out of my head just comes out.
You know, you spoke earlier about being a young girl and understanding poetry or listening to poetry. Was there an early experience, one that you can specifically state, that helped you learn that poetic language had power? Anything comes to mind?
Yeah, so my mom, so we grew up poor, but my mom, she liked to take us to the library. She loved to read. She liked to read like romance novels, like the bodice ripping stuff, but she was really interested in like the historical romance because she liked to learn about stuff. So she was always like telling me things and taking me to the library and stuff like that. So that sort of was this bridge. And then I would go off on my own and try to find things. So when I was little, it was like, you know, Dr. Seuss or whatever, like that kind of stuff. And then when I got maybe 10 or 11, I would go to the adult part of the library, like the big people section, and kind of roam around. And I found a poetry section. Now, the poetry section in Phoenix City, Alabama was very little. And it was like, you know, the classics, things like that. But I did find Emily Dickinson. This is probably the same story for a lot of people, but I didn't know what she was saying. I had no idea what any of it was about. I'm a 10-year-old girl, you know, but there's something about her work that just reached out through, you know, the years or my, you know, circumstance or whatever it was, and just like touched me. And it was a puzzle. And I checked the book out and I would try it and it would make me angry because I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it was something that, you know, that I needed to decipher. And so that was sort of the first, I don't know, like my first experience with poetry, my first experience with like that kind of, that way of writing beyond, you know, novels and things like that.
All right.
And yeah, so, and I still feel like I don't really 100% know all the time what she's talking about, but, you know, I love it.
Very nice, very nice. Share another poem.
Sure. Okay. This one, so I read the first one, Sunday Drive, and then I wanted to read the second one in the collection. So my idea is that the first one kind of introduces you to that family unit, gets you into that other world. And this second one sort of like has more of a footing in that other world of women, or the afterlife of women, or the Magnolia Canopy Otherworld, that place where women go, in my imagination. And it's kind of, you know, this song, the Peggy Lee song, Is That All There Is?
Yes.
Kind of like, it was inspired by that, but I'm a 90s teenager, so it was the PJ Harvey version of that song. So, Can't Stop Burning a Witch. We set a girl to burn, and in the ruin of her body, we stamp our feet, cake the mud and ash. We set her to burn, and we've been taught to hold our tongue, to kill that ancient stone pit in our stomachs. The mother yelled, "She is not a witch," as her body was rolled through the center of town. And we thought, are we also dead? The other girls met hand to hand as she lit up the night. And we thought, is this all? Thank you.
Oh, wow. As you think about your writing process, where do you write? Is there a specific place that you go? Is it anywhere? On the road, on the bicycle? Where do you write?
Oh, Lord, I cannot go anywhere. I have always really loved to hang out in my bedroom. Okay. I just love being in my bedroom. My husband will take up the living room, and I'll just be in there with all my books spread all over the bed, doing my own thing. So, and that is really my process. It's just like chilling out on my bed, propping myself up. I have tons and tons of books or like reference things around me, and I love being in there, but I also have a hard time sitting still, so I have to like do a lot of things while I'm writing. I really wish I could be someone that could just sit down and like pull it all out, but I have to like dip in, dip out, dip in, dip out. But yeah, I love to be in my bedroom with my cat next to me with all of my stuff around me.
What do you view as being the most difficult part of the artistic process? You've written a book, you've written a chapbook, you've been published. What's the most difficult part of the artistic process?
I think the most difficult part for me is knowing when something is finished, or knowing when, like, that self-doubt, I guess, or knowing if something is, in quotations, good, or good enough, or will reach someone, or will move someone. I don't, when you get so close to something, it sort of turns into like gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most difficult part, is like letting it breathe and coming back to it sometimes works, but sometimes it's really, there's like, oh, that's, it's still not good. No one's going to like this. And why would anyone want to read about my childhood? You know what I mean? Like that kind of like self-doubt and, not knowing when. Not knowing when.
What do you think is the easiest part of the process?
The easiest part would be when I'm just letting it come out, like the first little bit, when I have that idea and it's like there's no pressure, and not, it's self-pressure. No one's pressuring me. People have liked it or they don't like it. It's not like life ending, you know what I mean? But it's in your brain. Sometimes it can be, I don't know, because it's who you are and you're showing someone that, and it's scary. So when that first part, when I'm just like letting it, when it's free.
When it's free.
But then you start editing and revising and it becomes a poem.
Yes,
Really,
that is
it's a
true.
thing. It's a living thing,
That is my next question, Erin. That's my next question. And then we're going to take a break. This is my next question.
Okay.
Some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it, while others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft poem. What is your take on it?
I see. Gosh, I am not a spiritual person or anything like that, and so it's going to sound really silly, but I do, like, I will call my book she, and that sounds really silly, but I feel like they are, it's okay for someone to find themselves in it. It is a living document that I think I know what I put into it, but I probably don't know all of what's there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I see it in that way, and I'm fine with that. There's sometimes people will say things to me that I'm like, sure, I meant that, totally, because it sounds really smart, but it's like, but I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly.
Yes,
but
you are.
So I see it as a living thing that's like, it's about, again, it goes back to connection and like communication. And, you could say something to somebody and they could totally interpret it a different way, but that's okay,
Yes.
And I'm fine with that. As long as they don't interpret it in a terrible way that
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's share one more poem before we take a quick break.
Okay. This one is called The Slumber Party. So a few of the poems in this book are inspired by girls I grew up with, girls I went to high school with. And this is inspired by one special girl who I've, forever loved. But The Slumber Party. I heard she went and died into another girl in a house near a swamp where girls are caught face down, muck deep and motherless. She told me there were other girls sitting at a kitchen table with empty plates in front of them, and more girls in the bathroom draped over the shower, wet. She asked what man made their bodies into tables arms and legs bent backward, a coffee cup on the sternum. She didn't know she would be used up, but she told me. She tiptoed through the rooms, tracing her name on the walls just in case. My girl lost herself, a blonde hair flood on the floor, and she came back to me years later, wound tight, a coil, said, "Why me?" Thank you.
Wow. Let's take a brief break and we'll be right back. I'm here with Erin Carlyle. Her new book, Magnolia Canopy Otherworld, was published recently on Driftwood Press Poetry. Erin, question for you.
Yes.
All right. You talked earlier about Emily Dickinson. All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
So I love a lot of contemporary poets. I love a poet called Jennifer Moore, or Jen Moore. Her new book is called Easy Does It, but she wrote a book called The Veronica Maneuver. And she's just so, she's just like, the images she uses, I just wish that I could, like, it's just a fully developed thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure she sits for hours and like anyone else and does it. I don't know. But, like, it's spunky, if that's a good word for poetry. It's funny. Okay. And I have a hard time with humor in my own work, and I love it when I see it in other people's work. I love her. I love Natalie Shapiro. She also has like a snarkiness to her poetry. And there's a poet called Becca Claver. I actually took a little course with her at one point online at the beginning of the pandemic, and she's awesome. She has a book called Ready for the World, and it's just sort of like, it's a book of spells and poetry, and it's very 90s teen girl, but adult and not silly or anything like that, which teen girls aren't silly, but I don't know. So, I'm really into that. I love Rebecca Morgan Frank. She's so amazing. Again, it's just those images, and I love when a line just stands out on its own and is a poem on its own, and she can do that. Mm. Those are a few people, and I mean, I love a lot of people, so.
Oh, wow, very nice. Now, if you had to choose one favorite poet that you would wish to serve as your mentor, who would it be and why?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I have worked with Rebecca Morgan Frank, so I'll take someone else.
Okay.
I think I would love, can I do two? One contemporary and one who is contemporary, but just, let me do what I want. No, I'm just kidding. Tracy Brimhall, who wrote The Lady of the Ruins, and she read my book, and I was like, oh my God, she read my book. Just to begin, again, because of just that connection to the other worlds and that darkness that she can bring out. And there's also humor to it. And I just really love her work. And then I'll say for my 22-year-old self, Margaret Atwood, even though, a lot of people think of her novels and stuff, she was a poet as well. And just, I don't know, she's, I want to have that humor and that snarkiness in my poetry. So I want to work with people who can do that or bring that out.
Tell me more about the other world. Why that fascinates you so?
So the other world, it's in my work, is definitely, gosh, and again, I said earlier in this interview that I'm not really a spiritual person. I'm not a person who,
Yes.
you know, thinks about things in the world in that way. Sorry, my cat knocked a bunch of stuff over, so I'm trying to reorganize. Oh my gosh. Okay. 2 seconds. This is like doing stuff in your house gets you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Anyway, so the other world is basically, so I'm not a spiritual person, but I definitely grew up reading, mythology, or, even went to church with my grandma and things like that, and have thought about, what might happen after I die. And I think about, is this all there is, to go back to Peggy Lee? And
Peggy Lee.
That's sort of what Peggy Lee, PJ Harvey, whichever one. And I think about it, it's just sort of what's through the veils. Are there any veils? And especially when my father died, he died in 2019 of an overdose. And that really sent me reeling quite a bit, as far as my spiritual beliefs, my poetry, my life, my career, anything. It was just totally all geared towards thinking about how can I talk to him, how can I reach through. So I don't know, that even though I'm not a spiritual person, it's hard for me to think about things in that way. I want so badly for there to be something, and that's where that comes from. Okay, I'm sorry about my cat there. He's such a mess, you guys.
All right. Now, your poetry is very emotional. I mean, you cannot. Yes. When you hear it, its power is just so. It's almost in your face, in a sense. Do you think that someone can be a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
I think that's a good question. I would hesitate to say you can't be a poet, because if you want to be a poet, I want you to be a poet. But I think that most people feel strong emotions, so I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I think that we all tackle, as poets, we tackle different things. Like someone isn't, another poet's not going to write about their mom and dad, or their childhood, or, made up other world of dead women, you know what I mean? But it's but they may be feeling it strongly in a different way, and it comes out in a different way. So I don't know how to answer that question, because I feel like I want to say no, you can't be, because you have to feel and you have to bleed for the poetry or whatever, but you don't, I guess. We all do it in our different ways. And even if it's not as dark as maybe the stuff in Magnolia Canopy Otherworld can tend to be, doesn't mean it's not emotional. So, yeah, I took that one in a circle. I'm not sure if I answered it.
That's okay. Yes, that was perfect. Yeah. Please share another poem. I enjoy hearing you read.
Okay. This one, let me take a sip of water. This one is called Girl and Wall, and I wrote it for Francesca Woodman, who was a photographer in the late 1970s, committed suicide. Her whole story is wonderful and interesting and compelling, so people want to look it up. Her name was Francesca Woodman, but I was just thinking about, I had ended a relationship with another person after 12 years, and I found her work, and it just spoke to me. I was in my 30s, and this girl or woman who was in her late teens, early 20s when she did her work, and I'm thinking about, how she went before me, and I'm still here trying to think about the same things she was thinking about, like about my body and about my sexuality and about relationships and about the world, you know. So this is for her and for me. Okay. Girl, dirt, and wall. Your body is a scratched photograph, and I want to live like you do in front of a ruined wall, buttons on my skirt begging to be opened. You hold a jewel behind your back, palmed in your hand, and there are so many white ash trees behind you. I want to be in your photo. I want to put a mirror under my naked body and a finger in my mouth. I see myself like you on the floor, stretch marked, my dirty feet over yours. The tiles under your body are old. You are not. You are only 19, living in Italy. When I was 19, I lived with a man, did his dishes, and I have never been to Italy. You sit with your hands over your mouth, back straight, head down. The floor under you is celled, a honeycomb, and I would do your dishes. Francesca, now your head is on the floor, your feet are shelved inside a cabinet, and there is no room for your arms. If you were married, this is where you would put your china, says the stuffed raccoon at your ear. I hear you whisper to the cabinet. A curio is only for body curiosities. You cannot close the cabinet, and there isn't room for me inside. Look, 3 women who are also you hide behind mirrors, their own reflection. Am I also there in the blur of their bodies, or am I in the mold on the walls? What it comes down to is your dull stare at your birth certificate. Am I there in your gaze? I hover over the little fish in your bathtub, and there's a light coming in the windows. In all that sparkling doom, and your back to the camera, did you expect me to pick up your book? I try to figure the blurs of your long exposure and your suicide, and how I came after you, still a woman, and in your shadow, I try to master my body. I think that's it.
Wow, it's beautiful. The imagery, so rich.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you think you were meant to be a poet?
100%, yes.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
I used to before I knew about art or anything like that, or knew, just growing up in the South I didn't have the internet when I was, I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I would say I'm an artist. So I think that I came out knowing for sure I was an artist. And then poetry came when I found it at the library. And I then, went to school and found whatever kind of poetry they had there. It's probably still like classic stuff and things like that. I knew that I wanted to do it, and I wrote this little book when I was 8, and I can't remember the name of it. And I have it somewhere. It's like, it's not a real book. I mean, it's made out of like cardboard and stuff like that. And one of my teachers wrote a little note on the front, and I still have the little note. And it was like, I can't wait to read one of your books someday. These are so compelling, or something like that. And I'm like 8 years old, and I don't know. It was just so, it felt, right. So yeah, I think I don't think it's always easy in the world to like tell people you're a poet, though, because
yes, so true.
Capitalism and all of those things. It's like we're meant to be producing products, and I do. I mean, I have a book, but it's not the same thing as like building a game machine, or I don't know, whatever people buy. But I've recently just started doing it. What do you do? Oh, well, I'm a poet. It's like, and just let it drop and see what happens. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, a poet. But what do you do for money? Oh, like,
because you're right. It could go either way, either like enthused or like, what is that?
Right, exactly. And it's a mixed bag. And, but people are they like want to ask questions about it and get to know what I mean by that. So, or, look at me sideways, and that's fine too. But I've been owning it lately, like this is it,
All right.
this is who I am.
Well, how does it feel to own it? How does that make you feel?
Anxious. Because, because I don't know, because I feel like sometimes they might not think it's a real thing, and like,
okay.
I get nervous about like how people perceive me, I guess. And I'm human, and I want people to like me or understand me if they don't like me. And so it can be really scary to say, this is who I am and to own it. But it is liberating too, because it's like, well, this is what I am. I can't really change it, This is my brain works.
In my mind, you're a brilliant, powerful poet.
Thank
whose
you.
future is exceptionally bright.
Thank
because
you.
I really, really like your work because it's extremely accessible, and as I said earlier, to me, it's in your face. It's as if you've stripped away it's just so real to me. I really like it. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm owning it. Thank you.
All poets have several words that they use over and over and over again in their work. What are 3 of your absolute favorite words to use, you think?
Okay. I know for sure woods or the woods. It goes back to the land that I grew up in when I was a small child in Alabama. I know this for sure. I did those word clouds that people were doing a long time ago, on Facebook and things like that. I did that for my my MFA thesis, and it came back. It was like woods and was another women and dark or ghost or things like that, and that's fair. It's totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for woods is for sure. Dank I use a lot. Pine tree. There's a lot that's connected to the land and the woods down in Alabama.
Please share another poem. Sure.
So this one is called Doctor Shopping Ghost Story, and it is about the opioid crisis. Doctor Shopping Ghost Story. The doctors I see are benevolent spirits filling my prescriptions, orange bottles awaiting blessing for a doctor to dip a pen and anoint the paper. I hand one doctor my worry, I hand one doctor my pain, another my worry. I fill out the paperwork, present it to their open arms. The doctors watch me shiver. They write their diagnosis on my spine, whisper me back into being. Give me what I need, priests, or I will seek until I become a Percocet ghost, haunting a body, holes for eyes, a sheet soaked in Oxycontin, and you can never cut me off. In the beginning, it was not about becoming a ghost, a transparent pill casing, empty, longing. In the beginning, I was flat on my back, looking up at the stars. Yeah, so that's sort of my, it's sort of like about how when, you get hurt or something like major happens to you, it's not like you set out to do certain things. And I'm not like demonizing, doctors and things like that. There was a lot going on that started the opioid crisis, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people's hands. But, it sort of just happens and you become this thing. And I watched my dad, and my mom too. And it's really painful to see somebody who has so much potential, knocked down in the prime of their life. So, and I'm 30, almost 39 now. My dad had a heart attack when he was 36. I know now that was so young,
Yes, it's young.
So
that is young. That is young. That this line of conversation right now is so important because there's so many things that happen to people in their lives. There's so much happening in the world as we live in. The pandemic, opioid crisis, you name it. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern-day society?
I think that I don't know that I would say anyone has an obligation to do anything. And maybe I do mean they have an obligation, but I wouldn't know how to pressure somebody to do something. But I think that if you're someone who uses words, it could be very helpful for you to use those words to help other people. So I don't know what that looks like. If that's someone writing political work and you're on the mainstream and you are working on the boots on the ground kind of stuff, that is one way. Another way is a quieter way where you're reaching maybe a handful of people and you're changing their hearts, or you're introducing them to things they didn't know about. That's another way, and I do think that it's important to use your work and your gifts to better the world and to help people. And it can look in different ways, loud and quiet.
All right, very nice. Nicely stated. Please share another poem.
Sure. Let's see. So the third section of the book sort of gets into the ghostly other world. And this one's called The In-Between. And it's kind of a fever dream mixture of the movie Poltergeist, which is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
I think it's a very deep movie, and I will sit down with anyone and tell them all the symbols and everything. Anyways, but Poltergeist. And the time my grandma's house, well, there was like a big rainstorm and hail and stuff like that in Kentucky in the late 90s where we were living, and her backyard was flooded all the way up, and it came into her house, and firemen had to get her out with a canoe, and I have no idea how these two things mixed up in my head, but they have for some reason, and I just had to write a poem. And this sort of kicks off that third section. The In-Between. Here is a story. My mother saves me from the electric pool of the kitchen. She travels to the other side to find me in pink, asleep, and followed by the dead. She carries me home, teaches me how to dial a psychic phone. I call my grandmother God. Her voice is muffled by mud. I tracked it into her house. I'm sorry. I stamped it under my shoes. I walk down the road to her house where rain has made a pool in her backyard. The neighbors meet in that hole in the ground, make O's with their mouths at an ancient tree. I think, how do I get my grandmother out? The tree swallows me down its trunk stomach, and I hear a man sing, God is in his holy temple, as I fall through a static somewhere. And that was...
Oh, wow. I can see that guy in Poltergeist 2.
Yeah.
Saying.
Yeah, I really like the first one better, but yeah, that guy was so scary when I was a kid.
He was scary. I hate to digress, but he was scary to me.
Oh, my goodness.
Your poems have very detailed titles, very intricate. What role should the title play for a poem?
I definitely think it leads you in to what is going to happen in the poem. I don't necessarily think they all have to be, eye-catching or catchy or like a hook in a song or something like that, but they definitely lead you down that rabbit hole. I remember when I was doing my MFA, I started my MFA at New Mexico State, and then I transferred later to Bowling Green State University, which was a wonderful program, both were. And I remember when I first started, I was just I had one-word titles, and one of the girls in my program was like, you have to stop this. You need to tell people what the poem is going to be, or at least make it more dynamic and stuff. And so I started thinking, she's right. What am I doing? I don't know. I don't know that I have to do anything. Part of me wants to rebel when someone says you have to do something or stop doing something. But But I think she was right, Yeah.
Share another poem.
Sure. This is sort of toward the end. Song. This is called Skinny Dipping. And it is about girlhood. It's about being a teenager and hanging out with boys and thinking, questioning whether or not you care if they like you, or wanting so bad for them to like you, but then also wanting to just be with your girlfriends. Skinny dipping. We girls love to dip our toes in Green Creek water while we look at boys through a fog veil. And those boys look at us half-cocked, want us small. Do we like it? Do we want to take our clothes off, go all the way in the water, disappear, sirens and scum? The boys play fight in gray dirt, young dogs. They don't pay us any mind. We hold our noses, go down, and our bodies come together, a silver fish, beautiful like a coin. We swim through crushed beer cans and picnic trash. When we come out human again, we gasp for air. Thank you.
Wow. Let's take a brief break and we'll be right back. We are back. I'm here with Erin Carlyle, her new book, Magnolia Canopy Otherworld. Erin, is your book available on Amazon.com?
It is. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you can also go to driftwoodpress.net and get it there. And I think Bookshop as well.
Oh, very nice. You've been writing for a very long time, it sounds.
Yes.
Describe your relationship with poetry. How has it developed and changed throughout your life?
Yeah. So again, like I said earlier, I found I have a box of old poetry from teenage years, things like that, and going back and reading them, I can see that I'm grappling with the same kinds of things. My brain is trying to figure things out, but I just don't have the language or the tools to do it in a way that could reach people, or that people could understand, or that isn't so insular. And I don't want to say not universal, because I don't know about universal, but that, isn't, the craft isn't there. That sounds hoity-toity, but that's, so over the years, I've read people's work, and that's sort of I've consumed other people's stuff, and you can't really write in a vacuum. When I was doing it as a teenager, I'm trying to grapple with all these things that people have been trying to grapple with, forever. So I read people's work. I did, I went to school. I don't necessarily think you have to do an MFA or anything like that, but you definitely need to research and write and find out your place in this whole grand scheme of things. And I did a lot of that. And so now I feel like I have a lot of the tools in my tool belt to say what I want to say, and to craft something that I think other people will respond to. And it's not just me, pouring my feelings out. It is, but it's also something that is a little bit bigger, a little more connected. So I think that's sort of how it's changed over the years. And but I think I've been a similar person. I think I've been the same person my whole life. So.
All right. Well, this question, if you have your MFA, do you also belong to a writing group or community of writers that you share your work with? And if so, who are they?
Yeah. So I have a lot of poet friends from my MFA, and I have a lot of mentors. F. Daniel Resnick, who's a poet. He writes a lot. I don't want to say they're nature poems. It's not nature, but it's definitely rooted in a sort of like an Ohio nature-y. It's kind of like mine, but there's more. There's a darkness there in his work. Rosanna Boswell, she was in my program, and she just released a book, and it's called Hiding in a Thimble. She's amazing, and yeah, yes, I do, and I could rack my brain for all of these people. Rebecca Morgan Frank, again, I've been working with her. She's amazing, amazing poet and a wonderful person, and so giving of her time and her her connections, everything. She's just a really great human being who's helped me tremendously. So yes, definitely, lots of people.
Oh, very nice. Please share another poem.
Okay. This one is called, get to the page, Rabbit Diptych, and it's in two parts, so I'll pause in between. And it kind of was born out of the whole some of the Me Too stuff that was happening a few years ago, and definitely sort of a connection to some of these stories about comedians and people in the media who, as a woman, I look up to, and they're men and their art. I love their art, but then you find out things about them that aren't wonderful and that exclude you, and also outwardly cause danger to you. It's really painful. So this is called Rabbit Diptych. I am the rabbit from my heart tied up by the legs. You can break my skin, bunch it around my ankles, twist, pull my fur until I'm raw. Is your knife big enough? Do you see my ex-husbands asleep in the bushes outside my apartment? They dyed my feet blue for luck. I have to put a quarter in a toy machine and hope they pop back out. I know my career is my body, but I'm disappointed because my hunter will not speak to me. Instead, he whispers sorries to the wind while I sit in his hotel room. You looked at me as if you already knew you'd be pulling my fur from your teeth all night, slack-jawed, salivating. When you pulled out the white wine and not the red, I didn't understand you knew what to pair me with. You hurried me through my chewing. You didn't let me finish my meal. The first time you pushed your fingers through my thin membrane, I was not sure how to react. The second time my body moistened and opened, I even fell face first into your lap. I wondered which part of me would be a trophy, or when you would give up and call me a cab. That was it.
Wow. What do you hope readers get from encountering your poems?
I definitely just want, this first book, and I'm writing other stuff, and it's different and it's the same in a lot of ways. But with this one, I definitely just wanted to communicate, what created me as a human being, or like what has, and then in hopes that, other people who are dealing with certain things like this would have a deep connection with it, or see themselves in some way. I have one of my favorite artists of all time is the singer-songwriter Tori Amos. So she's really inspired everything that I've done. So I was in a lot of ways, I look up to her and how she is given of herself in that way. And I want to do that as well. but in a poetic form and not music. So that's, I want them to take that away. But, I think a lot of the work is political. It's personal, but it's political, which, makes sense. And so if it helps somebody understand, what it is like growing up with, parents who have dealt with drug addiction or poverty, things like that, that's wonderful too. So like the personal connection, but then that political drive as well.
Please share one more. We're almost out of time, but please share one more.
Okay,
Maybe two more. Please share two more. Two more.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. This one is just a weird little poem called Post Eve, and I'm just thinking about the creation, like biblical creation, and I don't really have a lot. I just put it out there. I like it, and I put it out there. Post
All
Eve.
right.
You are tender when you say to me, pull this bone out of my body. If you throw me out with the trash, I'll leave. Get this bone appraised. Take it to pawn. My feet one in front of the other. My head as it should be, downcast. See the bone in my hand? I will get nothing for it. Won't be worth the walk. So I stick the bone inside me. I lie down on the asphalt road and listen to distant men. They yell my name. I pull my skin apart, recite a story. My father was once a tree. And then this one is called The Afterlife of Women. It's the last poem in the book. And it's sort of just a ghostly world of a lot of the women and girls that I've known over the years, sort of thinking about them, trying to find them, trying to reach for them, trying to pull back those veils and see if anything's there, kind of thing. The Afterlife of Women. For me to stay here with the dead, I have to eat a flesh meal, make the commitment. But for now, I'm a struck chord. I sound through pine woods and the Kentucky. We were all once girls here, wanted to experience other worlds. But now I can't find a woman here among the discarded diaries and pocketbooks. In this place, we all linger, then disintegrate. I think I smell the oldest danger in the air, magnolia on the wind. I think I hear my mother calling, get home. That's it. Thank you.
Wow. Does knowing that your poems are published and out there in the world validate you being a poet, or are you content knowing that they're out of your system?
I think getting a book out there in the world is definitely validation. I don't think it's the only way to say I'm a poet. You don't have to have a book or anything like that. But for me, it definitely has made me feel accepted in a way. And I've been able to do readings and bring the book to a lot of people through virtually, of course, because of the pandemic. But so I don't think a person has to have that to feel validated. I could still call myself a poet, and I would, but having it is a dream come true. It's been, little girl Erin definitely wanted to have a book in her nerdy 8-year-old self. So,
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. What's next for you creatively? Where do you go from here?
I'm writing. I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic, so my husband and we both had to move to California, where he's from, for a little while, and I just took that time and just it sort of opened me up creatively to not be in the 9 to 5, and
yes.
So a lot of people, it was opposite. They couldn't do it, and that's totally fine. That makes sense. But for me, it's something opened up, and I have a lot that I'm messing with right now, like editing, revising, and I have this other book that is that's in the works. So there's that. I have some stuff coming out in different magazines. So that's what I'm doing creatively. And I am going to apply to PhD programs. So,
oh, wow, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, there's a lot on the horizon.
All right, fantastic. Well, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I enjoyed hearing your work. Magnolia Canopy Otherworld sounds like a fantastic book, and I look forward to purchasing a copy.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank you. I feel that you have a very bright future, and I wish you nothing but the best, as I said earlier.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, have a great evening. And to our listening audience, as I share every week, let poetry ring. Good night, everybody.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.